Let's go to Los Angeles and talk to the political analyst and commentator Peter Mathews about these two speeches that just happened in D.C. And Peter, what has the response been like?
It's been quite remarkable because most people still seem to blame the Republicans and Trump a lot more for the shutdown than the Democrats. In fact, 55% of the American public blames 50% blames President Trump, 5% of the Republicans in Congress, and only 35% of the Democrats. So not much has moved. This is pretty much of a stalemate. And the problem is it's an ethical question, too. What kind of nation do we want to be like? One that is inward-looking, that blocks off people completely. In fact, the Trump administration actually advocated limiting legal immigration as well, and that's completely unacceptable to most Americans. And this is seen as an epitome of the whole the contest over what kind of America we have: an open America reaching out to the world and in welcoming people and dealing with an illegal immigration problem in the right way, or are we going to have one that walls itself off with a huge wall that'll block the country from even being a nation of freedom? That's the real question, if you look at it that way, Kimberly.
Peter, well, if you look at the figures that Donald Trump spoke of just an hour ago in the Oval Office, he said ICE officers made 266,000 arrests of aliens with criminal records, including those charged or convicted of 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, and 4,000 violent killings. Over the years, thousands of Americans have been brutally killed by those who illegally entered our country, and thousands more lives will be lost if we don't act right now. Is there a general consensus that, given the figures that Donald Trump is giving, that this is a growing humanitarian and security crisis on the southern border?
I don't believe that most Americans believe those figures because he's been proven to not give us accurate figures. For example, he also said, his administration, that 4,000 terrorists have crossed the border in the last year. That's totally patently false. In fact, there's 12 suspected terrorists who are trying to get into the country. 12 on the terror watch list were stopped at the border. And that's been proven by stats itself. And so these kinds of numbers are not quite believed by American people that President Trump comes up with, because he's been known in the past to exaggerate numbers and to use only anecdotal evidence. And of course, he shows some tragic stories. He talks about the children who were killed, or a spouse that was killed by illegal immigrant, and how terrible that is. But looking at the numbers in terms of crime, for example, we know that people who come here in terms of undocumented immigration have a much lower crime rate than the general population. Those are stats that are put out by the government agencies, and also sociologists have studied it. This is a question of using anecdotal evidence to drum up support for his position on the wall. I don't think he's moved anyone to his side. If anything, the Democrats and Pelosi and Schumer, Senator Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, Speaker, have probably moved a few people in the middle to their side at this time, the way I saw it tonight. I watched the whole speech tonight, by the way, both speeches from both sides.
Let's talk about the speech. In particular, Donald Trump, this address to the nation, the first that he's given from the Oval Office. What was he trying to do with this? He was trying to directly appeal to the American people, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. And this is a very serious setting. These kinds of speeches from the Oval Office are only given in times of national or international crises. And he wants to put this wall situation and illegal immigration on that level, which is completely untoward in my view. It doesn't reach that crisis level. Most experts have said we do not have an invasion from the south across our border. And frankly, I've looked at this very carefully from a political economy point of view, and we know that the reason many people come from the south of the border to the United States, sometimes illegally, is because of a lack of good, high-paying jobs there, because of free trade, not fair trade. And those kinds of things are the real reason. And President Trump doesn't talk about that. Instead, he wants to vilify immigrants. He started his campaign, matter of fact, 2 years ago when he ran for president, by calling immigrants, illegal immigrants from the south of the border. He said, these are criminals and rapists, and there are maybe a few good people among them. That's how he started his campaign, in a raucous rally. And that set the tone. And this is very unfortunate. He's using this type of club to beat the country over with by shutting the government down. Democrats say separate the two issues. They're not connected. Get the government going, because many, many people, 800,000 government workers, are now not getting paid. They can't pay their rent. Their families don't have food to eat. The children are suffering. Get them back to work, and then we can discuss and work out a consensus on what we should do about immigration and the possible strengthening of the borders.
Sorry to jump in, but let's go back to his campaign. Sure. Hasn't Donald Trump all along said that it's Mexico that's going to pay for this border wall? Why is he now asking Congress for $5.7 billion to build it?
because he cannot get Mexico to pay. And he probably knew that he never would, because Mexico as a sovereign nation will never agree to that. And yet he wants to get the wall built. So now he's asking Congress and the American taxpayers to foot $5.7 billion. He's actually threatened to declare a state of emergency, or what's called a national emergency, in order to then grab the money from the Defense Department, the military budget. And that is completely
the process.
Do
you think that's the beginning of this process, Peter, that is why he's come out to appeal to the nation, and then his next step will be that?
I think it's very possible, and that'll create a major crisis, because when the president declares a national emergency, it has to do with a specific situation, such as a hurricane that's devastated lives, or an earthquake, or sometimes an international crisis, but not for something like this where there's no invasion, there's no crisis. And if he declares the emergency, Congress will immediately take that to the court, Supreme Court, and they will challenge it, and the court will probably decide against him, in my view. Or the Congress can actually vote in a concurrent resolution to block the president and to override him by 2/3 vote to nullify the national emergency. But let me tell you something, there's many laws that back up a national emergency that are on the books, and some of them actually allow the president, if he declares a national emergency and if Congress accepts it, to be able to seize private property, seize commodities, and declare martial law. It's very, very serious. That something very serious can occur if we let this president get away with something like this, in my view.
Okay, Peter, thank you so much. Day 18 of this shutdown, so no doubt we'll be hearing a lot more about it. Peter, thanks a lot for your analysis.
Thank you, Kimberly. My pleasure. Take care.